Rutherford.
Hey, good morning, guys. I'm doing great. How are you?
We are doing great. Floor is yours, as we do every single week. Your initial analysis before we start asking you questions on how the Eagles played yesterday.
The Eagles gained some traction after a slow start to the game. They really leaned heavily on Saquon Barkley, and while it was rather simplistic, it was super effective. Obviously, 176 rushing yards, 17 carries. He could have rushed for 250 or 300 if they had kept him in for the entirety of that game. And looking at it on the defensive side, another strong performance from Vic Fangio's bunch. They got after the quarterback. All three levels were working in concert, and 8 sacks, 6 of which were from different players. I thought that was a tremendous performance, regardless of who the opposition was. Guys, I'll say this. Nick Sirianni was heavily scrutinized last week coming off the Browns game, and when he was at his most vulnerable, many actually even questioned how his actions played in the NFL locker room. To a man, that roster responded in resounding fashion. They really did. They had his back. Should put a lot of those theories to rest.
9 quarters without giving up an offensive touchdown. That's pretty amazing. So when you look at what is going on the defensive side of the ball, what is absolutely shocking you?
Shocking, more so that the pass rush is getting hung with regularity, because when you go radio silent for as long as they had through the first 4 games or so, you start to wonder if that's sort of going to be a trend that's going to continue throughout the season. But, John, 5 sacks a week ago against the Browns, 2 of which came from your edge rushers. Then this week, see 2 sacks from Nakobe Dean, 2 sacks from Jalen Carter, and then Nolan Smith has another sack in the second consecutive week. I just think that seeing that unit come to life, able to see how the rush and cover work in tandem, and it's obviously on the back end, they're reaping the benefits of a pass rush. That's how this defense is supposed to look.
Andrew, you mentioned that the offense was simplistic yesterday, and as you know, based on our conversations, I have been asking for such simplicity on the offense. Is this something that they continue to do? Was it just the game plan this week? Because I know their obsession with chunk plays. They love it. But if this is what works, why go away from it?
I think that this may have been exclusive to the opposition. Obviously, they came into this game surrendering an average of 5.2 yards on the ground. So it behooved the Eagles to really take advantage of it, and the script really set up for Saquon to have a nice return to MetLife Stadium. But I think that you're going to see them. They're always going to DNA, and their philosophical approach is always going to be to take to the air, Andrew. So I think you're going to see a way against the Bengals where they do have a little bit better run defense than the Giants and the Browns. You're going to see them try to revert back to the passing game. But I think that they're going to, and sometimes we talk about this, you have to take a step back, look at the offense, assess what's working and what's not working. I think you're going to see a little bit more balance this time around, because you see how dominant Saquon Barkley can be. You also don't want to forget about those passing options in A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and even Saquon in the passing game. So I think you're going to see more of a balance than you saw Sunday.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because Devontae Smith, I don't know how anonymous he can be in a game, but that was about as much as he can be. Was that a function of just what was going right? But I can't believe they're not getting him more involved overall this year.
Yeah, it was curious on Sunday, John, to not see him as involved as he normally is, but what I will say is it just was a byproduct of the game plan. Eagles were able to shorten the game by getting Saquon involved early and often. Saquon was really effective. He only had 114 yards passing, so 89 of which went to A.J. Brown. So there wasn't a whole lot left over for Devontae to do anything, but it could very easily swing next week, and Devontae could be the player who has 100 yards receiving. That's what makes that offense so lethal, that you never know. It's a pick your poison. You can't just fixate on one player. They can beat you a multitude of different ways. So to me, I think that it wasn't his week on Sunday, which was kind of curious, but that's not to say that next week he's not the one that's sort of reaping the benefits of having so many weapons on the offense.
I would say the only real blemish on the game is, once again, no points in the first quarter. So through 6 weeks this year, 6 games for the Eagles, they've not scored a point in the first quarter. We mentioned the game plan. I did not like the game plan to start. Now, I'll ask you, was that kudos to the Giants' defense, or was that the Eagles' offense struggling to start? Would like your opinion on that.
Well, it was kudos to the Giants' defense for being able to key in on Fred Johnson, because you mentioned the slow start being one of the more problematic elements, probably the only problematic element coming out of that game, Andrew. But I would also say Fred Johnson struggled a little bit at left tackle, and I thought that the Eagles didn't do a lot to help him out early on in that game when the Giants pounced on that, and they took advantage of it. And then I think you saw the Eagles adjust, and they were able to settle it.
Right, and that's why, like, when I say the game plan, like, they're taking shots downfield to start the game again. And you know that you're without Jordan Mailata, and you know that Brian Burns is a beast and Dexter Lawrence is a beast, and you know that you can run the football against this Giants team, which they did. So I like to give credit that they made the adjustment. It's just it's confusing to me that that's not how they started the ball game.
Yeah, but I think looking at it in terms of even the week before that, when Fred Johnson had to come in mid-game or really towards the end of that game with Jordan Mailata, 3 plays later, Jalen Hurts is hitting Devontae Smith for a 45-yard touchdown. So I really do believe that they felt that they could sort of mask it a little bit and that it would be able to function, maybe not as to the extent of how it is with Jordan Mailata there, but that they could certainly run a lot of the same things they wanted to do. And I think they quickly found out that wasn't going to be the case, and they pivoted and they leaned on the ground game.
Seeing a note out of Vegas this morning. The Commanders are expected to be underdogs in one game in their final 10. And you look at what the Eagles are doing right now, and you look at what other teams in the NFC are doing. Do you see an Eagles team that is ready to be sitting at that big boy table with the best teams in the NFC, or do you still need to see a lot more than you've seen the last 2 weeks?
Now, I think if they can, and I know going off the Browns game you heard, yeah, but that was just the Browns. That was a sentiment that I heard throughout the week, and they almost like the consensus wanted to see it like replicated for another week. Now you're seeing a lot of the same things manifest for another week in dominating fashion, particularly on the defensive side. So for me, I think that they have taken that step forward where they can contend with anybody in the NFC, and the biggest testament to that is how their defense has elevated their performance. And a lot of the conversation and a lot of what I was able to glean in the locker room after that game is that it is coming together. They're starting to gel. It did take time because there's a lot of young pieces there. And talking to multiple players, that was the sentiment that I was able to gather. So I think that there's something to be said for that, and they should be able to use this and propel forward.
And what has happened the last 2 weeks where now all of a sudden we see a more ferocious Eagles defense? Has it been personnel on the field? Has it been the way Vic Fangio is disguising blitzes? What have you picked up through watching the games and watching the film where you go, this is why the Eagles defense is thriving?
I think it all starts right up front with Jalen Carter. When Jalen Carter is at his most dominant, that's when the whole defense sort of reaps the benefits. You're seeing him occupy double teams. He had 2 sacks yesterday. It frees other players up. Kobe Dean got home on blitzes, and he mentioned after the game that he had opportunities early in the season, but he wasn't getting home, so he wasn't asked to blitz as much. And when his number was called, he found a way to make it happen. And Kobe mentioned to me earlier in the year that when the defense is functioning at its peak form, it was going to be a junkyard defense, a gritty, pummeling type of defense that was based on, it was sort of a no-name defense that he described it, in that you can't just fixate on one player. The whole unit's coming after you for 60 minutes. And I think they're starting to trend in that direction. But I think it's just a mentality, getting reps with one another, and really just getting on the same page and fine-tuning details. You're seeing it all start to gel. And I really do believe that this is more or less the defense you're going to see for the majority of the season.
I know you probably haven't looked at it yet, but what do you think the line is on the Eagles-Bengals game?
I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to guess.
They're 2.5-point underdogs. I can't wait to hear the analysis this week on the Bengals-Eagles as we talk about it all week long. And you've got a probably busy schedule all week long, keeping people informed here in the Fanatic, right?
But yeah, I sure do. I do like it. It's early, and we have to kind of gauge the matchup. But on the surface, John, I really like the Eagles' chances this weekend in Cincinnati. And really, you could sense that they're building this confidence after having 2 performances in the fashion that they did. And you look at how the team rallied around their head coach, Nick Sirianni. Talk about the connection piece, right? Look no further than Mekhi Becton standing outside the locker room greeting players as they came in. Mekhi Becton left the game with a concussion. Kenny Gainwell had a nice game after Saquon left the game. Saquon was the happiest player on the sideline and was excited to see him get his opportunities. This is all sort of think you can galvanize a team, and you're going to see it move, as they continue to move forward.
Andrew, that's why I said last segment, I think we can say that the Eagles fans that were behind Nick Sirianni during the Cleveland Browns game turned the season around.